Okay, let's talk about employee evaluations.
Okay.
A lot of factors to take into consideration when you do them, what time of year, how frequently, kind of how you gut check to know if they are working and sort of soliciting the right information that you need. So what are your thoughts on kind of producing effective employee evaluations?
A lot goes into an employee evaluation, right? And what we're using it for leadership and for HR standpoint is, are we continuing to employ the best person for the job? Are they happy with their job? Are they moving up through the company and the pace in which they want to or not? It also gives us the ability to ask some difficult questions, give some great praise. And so I think when you're preparing to give a review, doing it the same way because you've always done it that way usually is not the best way to do it. So I think that we can really slow down with the employee reviews and say, okay, what is the goal for leadership, their department, and the employee? And get really dive deep into that and really decide how deep you want to go. So I think that when we can start preparing reviews, it's one, having a goal of what you're trying to accomplish, and then two, for the company and for the employee.
Yeah.
So reviews are so important for both the company and the employee, right? This is the time to dig into what's working, what's not working, and to create a system that is trackable and to create data points for the many years, hopefully, that your employee is with you, to see where they started and to see where they are and where they're going. So I think it gives us a chance to align with employees, make sure that they're moving up and through the company at the pace that they want to and that they're ready for, and for their supervisor to either agree or disagree and give points of, this can be done better, you're doing this great. And they can be reviews. I don't think anyone loves a review.
Yeah.
It is a point to discuss things that might be uncomfortable. I personally, my experience has been in small to medium-sized, very entrepreneurial businesses. And so I am not of the history or the experience of connecting reviews to performance-based bonuses or raises. A lot of the times in the companies that we work for, their bonuses and their raises are based on how they did at the company that year, not so much performance-based. So I think it's natural as we grow up and while we go through college and as we watch movies and have experience in this kind of corporate feeling world, that in a smaller, more entrepreneurial company, I think having reviews in the middle of the year or at the beginning of Q3 or 4, not at the end of the year, because I think an employee just ties together that, oh, if I had a really bad review and then I got this bonus, that it's just hard not to tie it together. I think that can become confusing. Or I just had a stellar review, but they're not giving
I'm not getting
bonuses.
a bonus.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to separate that when it's happening at the same time. So I'm a big fan of communicating to the employee, this is not a performance-based review. This is just a review of your performance. And I know that sounds kind of the same thing, but it's just not tied to a bonus or a raise.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a little bit of the pressure off for both management and the employee to say, this is just a time to talk about how we're doing. How are we doing as a company? How are you doing as an employee? How do you feel? And moving through questions and realizing where we might need help as a company in training or in culture or whatever comes up, right? And I think that when you're sitting down with an employee, it's pretty standard to grab last year's review and compare it to this year's review. I think as many years of data that you have, it is so fascinating to look at it from their first review to maybe this is their 5th, 6th, 10th review.
Yeah.
Companies that have great retention plans tend to have so much data on their employees because they have all of these reviews. And I think it's a really good touch point and gut check of maybe you're not super thrilled with your 6-year employee's performance and they have never been your greatest performer. They've never really blown you out of the water, but they're stable, they're steady, they come to work every day. But if you can look at 6 years of data and say, gosh, when they started, their experience was so much less and they had trouble with this and now they're great at this. Maybe it was communication, or maybe it was the way that they emailed people. And you're saying, you know, when that was an issue 6 years ago and now it's not an issue at all.
Yeah.
You have to remember that these employees are people, they're changing, they're evolving, they're learning, they're going through things in their lives that when we can look at a trend of data of these reviews, we can really customize and dial into each employee. And you know, if you're managing 500 people, that's hard to do. But in most of our clients' cases, you can get really personal with these people and help create a plan for growth. And I think that those reviews also add to strong retention.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you mention the timing of the reviews, especially in cases with maybe smaller businesses where they have separated performance evaluations and bonuses. For companies, let's say, where bonuses are performance-based, you know, I would add in my experience at larger companies, more corporate type situations, having a really defined cadence of quarterly reviews and a formal end of year review is really important for management and for employees. And I think one of the biggest things I would hear from teams in these types of company environments is how cumbersome the process would be. Like, people would get flashbacks to being in college and like being up all night writing a essay or, you know, a midterm. And so I think having informal quarterly reviews take some of the pressure off of your formal end of year review, because you and your employee are having a dialogue throughout the year. Again, there's no surprises on how someone is trending towards their performance. There's no confusion on what the goals are that they are working towards, especially if they are interested in a promotion or they're working towards that next level, right? So having really clearly defined goals, having really clearly defined competencies for that next role they're working towards, having those touch bases every quarter to see how are you trending towards those goals? What's maybe the one thing we really want to focus on next quarter? Like you said, dive in, get deep, get personal. You know, maybe you have 5 goals, but for this one person, hey, this quarter, let's really just focus on this particular thing. This is where we're going to drive like the biggest outcome for you. And then I think another really interesting benefit at an end of year evaluation process is the information you glean from an employee's self-evaluation and a manager's evaluation. Because boy, what happens when there's a really big discrepancy in how an employee is viewing, valuing their work, and if a manager is seeing that really differently, that's a big cue to leadership, ownership, to say, okay, we need to make sure we are aligned on how we are assessing performance and how, you know, we can make sure that an associate at the, you know, at the entry level and a executive know how to align in assessing that. There shouldn't be huge discrepancies where someone thinks they're just
killing it
and they're gonna get met with a review that's like, oh boy,
you're not.
So those are really great pieces of information leadership can take, you know, and figure out, okay, how can we better program training, evaluations, all of those types of feedback channels.
I agree. I think reviews are so important. And like you said, when you do the self-review and you come back and you are so far off base, there's so many points to look at because there is a disconnect
somewhere.
And what a great opportunity to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when you have multiple employees that you're way off with, you know, then I would really look at, like you said, training or just the review process in general. Is it too stressful? Is it not? And I think the last thing I would add in the review process is you talked about doing them quarterly. I'm talking about doing them yearly. As leadership, we have a responsibility to nurture our team. And if something comes up between reviews, you need to communicate that to your people.
Yeah.
Even if it's every other week, something needs to be discussed, good or bad. And also don't not give the good news, take them to lunch for you really managed this account great while so-and-so was on maternity leave. I just wanted to thank you for this and take you to lunch and just let you know we appreciate you.
Yeah.
That's as important as saying, hey, really need you to sharpen this skill set.
Yes, good point.
It's all communication and it's all transparency. And I think that's how we build trust with our employees, and that's how we trust them and they trust us. And that's the goal, right?
And that goes back to culture, that goes back to retention. All
Yep.
of those things really tie in together.
Yeah, it's all about the retention.